Welcome to Wildspire. You get to be a fly on the wall for my intimate conversations with entrepreneurs who are changing the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Benedetto, coach, storyteller, and unmarketer at The Awakened Business, helping coaches and change-making entrepreneurs unleash their inspired message and share it with playful unmarketing. I'll ask curious questions and explore uncharted waters with my guest today. Anything can happen when we step into the unknown of infinite creativity, and that's where we're going to play. My guest today is Michael Neill, a mentor, teacher, and coach of mine for over 7 years. Needless to say, I'm super excited to have him as a guest on my podcast and really happy to introduce him to you. This was a beautiful co-exploratory conversation in which we talk about the self and the ego, and I loved it so much. Let me tell you a little bit about Michael Neill and his professional background. Michael Neill is an internationally renowned transformative teacher, author, broadcaster, and speaker, described as having the unique ability to blend the sacred with the profane. The inside-out understanding at the heart of his work challenges the cultural mythology that stress, pressure, and other symptoms of seriousness are a necessary part of adaptation and growth in business or indeed any area of life. He's spent more than 3 decades as a coach, advisor, friend, mentor, and creative sparkplug to founders, CEOs, celebrities, royalty, and those who are up to something in the world. His global client base is wide and diverse, having served clients in North America, UK, Europe, and the Middle East in the fields of investment, sales, energy, manufacturing, the entertainment and media industry, and more. He has been consistently ranked alongside Jack Canfield, Tony Robbins, and other legends in the field as one of the top 30 coaching thought leaders in the world, and continues to run a small private practice working with high performers in their fields of expertise. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Michael Neill. Hi, Michael. Welcome to my podcast. This is Wildspire.
Wow, do you have to say it in that voice? Wildspire.
No,
it's a pleasure to be here on Wildspire.
I said it that way just for you. I swear I've never said it that way before, and I will never say it that way since.
Oh, good. So we've got our own tonality. I like that.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I am going to start with a gush. I wasn't sure if I would, but Michael, I can trace so many amazing and beautiful things in my life back to you. And my first random stumbling into the very first advanced course many years ago. And I'm just so grateful that you being you turned out to be so useful for me.
Well, thank you. And it works well because, I was going to be me anyways.
I think that's just a beautiful, I feel like I am inspired in life and business by that, by being ourselves and just seeing what happens in everything that we do. And that's how I see your reach, your creations going out into the world. So I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and say thank you for that, because it's been such a blessing to me personally.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
So when we were chatting about what we might explore, and you gave a couple ideas, and then you said a whole new way of thinking about ego and the self. And I'm really intrigued by that because I think I've been obsessed with myself all my life.
How unusual.
And also obsessed with the question, who am I? Which at some point morphed into, what am I? What does this mean? So, yeah, could you tell me a little bit about that? What is this whole new way of thinking about it for you?
Yeah. And I'm going to do something that's terrible podcast etiquette, and that I'm going to get up and look for something in the middle of the podcast. So, speak amongst yourselves. I'll even talk from a distance so we have a kind of a sense. something's really happening. And, if they're not watching the video, they don't know if it was like a clever mic trick or I actually got up. I did. I wanted to read something. There's a thing that is not in this notebook. It's in a different notebook. So I'm not going to read it, but I'll come at it a different way. I have always equated ego in everything but the Freudian sense of ego, like when it's talked about in spiritual circles, as the thing in us that's evil and bad and sinful and wrong, and we should do everything we can to destroy. And in a way, what I realized is I was confusing ego with vanity, with arrogance. And I think sometimes the word is used that way, like, oh, they're so egotistical, they're so full of themselves. So consequently, in my world, anything that smacked of arrogance was a venal sin. Like it was, no, you do not, and it makes marketing really hard, but also it made a lot of things really hard, because anytime I would start to really enjoy and appreciate what I was doing, I'd give myself so much crap for it that it would take the shine off it. And that just was how it was. Like, I didn't necessarily even think that was not like that for anyone else, but that seemed normal to me. So I was battling my ego by not letting myself get, and if somebody else didn't bring me down a peg or two, I would. Right. And then I heard this quote from the Scottish mystic Sid Banks, the one I got up and walked around thinking I had in my notebook, but I've changed notebooks. And essentially, not a direct quote anymore, but essentially what he said was when you stop trying to be your ego, your image of self, your image of self-importance, then you find that what's left is really nice. Like who you actually are, it's really nice. It's much better. And something in that spoke to something in me. And I had an experience I had not had that I can remember in my adult life of feeling proud of myself and not vomiting immediately afterwards. Like I don't know, maybe I had pride bulimia, but it's like, that feeling's not allowed in here. And what was interesting about it is I felt the way that I feel about my son and my daughters when they do cool things. There was something so honest and genuine and loving and caring and excited and nothing icky at all. And I didn't know that what I thought of as pride was really pride plus insecurity. That's why it felt so bad. It was the taint of insecurity. It wasn't the pride that felt. Pride feels beautiful. I love being proud of my kids. I love being proud of things that my clients do. I love being proud. And I just had never realized, I could love being proud of me. Because I thought that would send me straight to hell, which I wasn't a big fan of the idea of. So that was huge. And it made me realize that being yourself, as opposed to, and here's how I'm going to redefine ego. Ego is your self-image. Ego is the way you think of yourself, the way you would like to be thought of, the way you would like to think of yourself. It's not inherently vain. In fact, a lot of our egos are all about humility. I want to be seen as humble. I don't want people to think I'm too big for my britches, too big for my boots. I don't want people to think this. I don't want to think this. I want to think this. I want people to think this. And in that sense, it's no longer a moral issue. It's a practical one. There is a difference between who you are and who you think you are, who you are and who you think you should be, who you are and who you think would be better. And that's the problem with ego. Not that it's a sin, not that it's bad and wrong. It's that it takes us away from our true nature, and our true nature is divine. Our true nature is spirit. Our true nature is pure. Our true nature is of life. And I was thinking about this earlier today. I was thinking about that if I were we're going to try to describe what it means to be yourself, I might use words like a being of light, pure presence, infinite creative potential, delight in form. But as soon as I do that, and now I have my list, there's a danger of that description turning into a prescription, turning into a new self-image, turning into how I should be. Okay, so I wake up and I'm a little hungover and I don't feel very well, but I'm a being of light and I am delight in form and I am this. Okay, here I go. And now it's become a costume. Now that description has become a mask. Now what was just words to articulate who I am has become an egoic straitjacket of who I have to be. And it is extraordinary in my limited, and I say limited just because it's been like 6 months since I had this insight, but it has been extraordinary how different the experience of being myself has been, and how obvious it is to me when I'm with people, the extent to which I'm talking to them and the extent to which I'm talking to their ego, not the bad, wrong part of them, but the self-image, the way they are trying to be seen. Discuss.
Yeah, I need a cue for my own podcast, Michael. Thank God for you. I knew there was a reason
I just didn't want them to think I got up and walked away from the mic again. I mean, I wanted them to know it was you.
I listen to my friends Win and Kate on their podcast far too much to be afraid of a little dead air anymore.
and I have been so trained from decades of doing radio that you can get away with this much dead air. Like,
yeah. You called me out on the not personally, but spoke to me on the invitation webinar the other day. And I don't know for sure that you were referencing my post or not, but you might as well have been, about someone saying, oh, when I saw that the first invitation was getting to know myself, my heart sank. And I thought, oh, I'm so tired of my stories of me. And that was me who wrote that, or something like. And I felt that. And I brought it was a bad attitude for me. It wasn't really a bad attitude. It was like like that kind of thing into the exploration. And you made a comment to the effect of like, and I wonder what this person thinks getting to know themselves has to do with their stories about themselves. And even before you were saying that, I started to see that I had this confusion about what being with me really meant. That what I didn't like was going into the stories of me, being with that old, sad, tired, worn out story. But not me. That isn't me.
No.
And I hear you speaking to something in that. And I'm wondering how, I felt it when you said it, but I'm wondering how this might be shifting your relationship with yourself, your actual self, seeing this distinction about what the ego is, and that it's not bad, that it's not wrong, and it's not something we have to avoid. It's just thought. right? That happens to be about ourselves.
So in a way, and I'm putting qualifier tonality around it, I don't have a relationship with my true self. That's me. I have a relationship with my ego. I have a relationship with my thoughts. I have a relationship with my feelings and emotions. I have a relationship with my habits. I have a relationship with my memories, and I have a relationship with my imaginings. But I don't have a relationship with myself in that sense, because I am that. So in spiritual teachings, they talk about this sort of, and it's always a weird thing to like progress in waking up. It's like, well, a little awake, more awake, really awake, awake. Okay, there you go. We've got a progress. We have a scale now we can measure ourselves against. But one of the things that they talk about is when the locus of identity shifts. When it shifts from, me, the little person trying to make their way in the world, what I would call Michael, what I would call Stephanie, and me, you. And I do tend to use the word soul level. I use the word essence or essential self, true identity. But what I really mean is you. What I really mean is me. And so being yourself is not being this little person trying to have a relationship with the divine, or not thinking there is a divine, or trying to have a better relationship with other people or my feelings, or like it's being myself is this. And sometimes talking about it enhances the experience. And sometimes talking about it diminishes and sits on top of and separates me out from the experience. So when I was younger, but started exploring this in the late 80s, I remember a moment where I thought, sometimes I feel like I'm Michael loving God, and sometimes I feel like I'm God loving Michael. And while there's still truth in that, I wouldn't probably just say it in the same way. Sometimes I'm disconnected and caught up from myself. And sometimes I'm being myself. And really, probably a more accurate way of saying it is, sometimes I'm being myself with a lot of noise in the system and a lot of thinking on my mind. And sometimes I'm being myself without much noise in the system and without a lot of thinking in my mind. But I'm always being myself. Like the self I am right now. Not this, I know for me, I used to hear about our true self and think, oh yes, I've been that for a minute once, right? Oh, I remember that. That was really nice. How do I do that more? Well, no, that was just a lovely experience you're remembering. You are always your true self. And a lot of the time you don't notice. And the feelings that everybody wants of depth and peace and presence and spirit and love, they're the feeling you're in right now, felt. Not in replacing the feeling you're having right now with the one you remember or the one you imagine.
There's such a beautiful difference in seeing the completeness of being what we are, as complete, as fully present, as natural, and that which feels like it isn't, as additive, that can easily be subtracted, but never touches what's already always there. And I haven't really thought about myself that way.
Mm.
I think because my thinking about myself had been so much thinking of myself that it was too messy for me to touch.
Yeah.
And I prefer to just be, or to be present, which felt somehow less messy, less sticky, less problematic. But I'm really enjoying this, both in your exploration inside of the invitation, inside of what you're sharing right now,
Mm.
because it's refreshingly simple
Mm.
and reassuring about the experience of being me.
Yeah, we're so conditioned to look for a gap. Okay, so this is me, and that's who I should be, my ideal self, my enlightened self, my true self, my better self, whatever language we've got for it. And what's the gap? And how do I bridge the gap? And like the vast majority of the self-help industry, the vast majority of the of spiritual movements, let's call them, is in service of closing the gap. But the gap is illusory. So you create a gap and then try to close it, and nothing's happened. The whole thing is only happening in your own mind. And if you can see that, glimpse that, intuit that, sense that that might have something to it, that, oh my God, you realize you suddenly you're there because you always were. And the illusion of the gap disappears. I remember a story I've always loved about, one of my mentors, George Pransky, was talking with a CEO, and he basically was pointing out to the CEO that all his problems were made of thought. There were a few things going on in the world and his business, but 9/10 of what he was wrestling with was in his own mind. And if he stopped thinking about it, it would go away. And the CEO, quite upset, said, "George, are you telling me that what I've devoted my life to conquering is just a mirage?" And George said, "Well, it's a real mirage." Like, that's the thing. The gap is a real mirage. The ego is a real mirage. We can see it. We can sense it. We can move towards it, but it isn't really there. When we close our eyes, it goes away.
You know what I'm having a feeling of as you're talking about this, Michael, is that the same is true for us and God, being me and knowing God, that make-believe gap.
There's another line from Sid Banks that I love. And he said, "God I am, but I'm not God." And look, I can't pretend I know what he meant, but what that meant to me was so clear. It's like, oh yeah, I am this, but I'm not some ultimate being lording it all over you little mortals with your books about me. Like, I'm not that character. That's not what it is to say God I am, or I am God. It's an attempt to describe the indescribable, to F the ineffable. It's an attempt to put words to this invisible knowing of who we are. And as I said, with words, sometimes that's really helpful in that it makes it even more tangible. And sometimes it's really unhelpful because it makes it seem like a thing instead of just what is.
I was on the train the other day and started to have these spiritual experiences on a train. And I don't know what it is. Maybe
Sorry, is that allowed in second class, or were you in first class? Because normally they've got rules about these things.
This was a classless train ride, completely
Wow.
classless.
Okay, so not in Europe. I got you. Okay, that's
This in this mass of humanity on a train. Sometimes, like I put some music on, not even particular music, just music that moves me. And I look at the people and it feels like something expands.
Mhm.
And suddenly they're not so apart from me.
Mhm.
And then I look outside and it feels like I start feeling more like Alan Watts has a quote. I don't know if you know it, but he talks about being apertures that God looks out of. And that's what I start to feel a little, like not, and it moves me to tears. And I think, oh, these people in here, I'm standing room only on a train. They're going to think, what's wrong with the poor American girl? Like, I don't know. It was in Europe. Um, but it's such a beautiful experience when that idea of self and others starts to just get a little fuzzy. I'm not even going to say dissolve. It just gets a little fuzzier, just a little.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know the Alan Watts version, but there's a William Blake quote I love, which sounds very similar. Which is, I look through my eyes, not with them, and that always evokes that sense for me.
Yeah. There was oh, you know him. He was on your Might Help Can't Hurt, I think. Nick Askew, who does the
Yeah.
films.
Yeah.
And he talked about in his films where his soul biographies. Ooh, the
Yeah.
words are coming back to me now. That's unusual. In his soul biographies that he sort of notices that moment when people aren't speaking from themselves. Something is speaking through them. Something is coming through them. And the feeling that he has when that happens. And that seems to me more like what it is to be myself without the friction, the thinking, the extras, the thoughts of what that is and isn't.
I mean, sometimes the most accurate description I have for that experience is getting out of the way. Sometimes the most accurate description I have for that experience is showing up. And they're both what it feels like. But I think the one that's closer to truth is showing up.
Every time I get closer to that, simply being me in anything that I'm doing, the easier it is and the better it feels. And I keep finding new applications for this that I didn't realize, new places I was making exceptions where it makes sense to have thinking about me in this situation. And I want to share with you this, what I've been experiencing in dancing. So you're creating the Impossible program earlier this year. See, all the references to your programs in this, like, I'm totally outing myself as a Michael Neill fan, okay? Like, if people didn't already know, they know,
I think a gush at the beginning might have given you away, but I mean, hey, maybe somebody missed the beginning, they came in late, and now they're finding out, oh shit, this isn't neutral. She's not being objective and journalistic.
Oh, hell no. Anyway, as a part of the Creating the Impossible course, I set myself the impossible project of performing a dance for someone who's like told themselves forever. I told myself I couldn't dance. I had that reinforced by other people. And I did not do it within the 90 days. But this desire to perform dance has continued and is completely changing my life. What I'm seeing in this, I've finally begun to actually fall in love with the learning curve after hearing you talk about this how many times. But here's what I want to share. The other day, I had a really clean experience of this, of showing up, really showing up in the dance and not caring about how it looked, who noticed, who didn't, and still having this felt intention for it to be beautiful and interesting and entertaining. And I had a video of it. So I watched it afterward and was actually able to watch it without going into judgment. Like I could see the aliveness in the way I was moving, imperfectly, clumsily. And then sometimes there was a moment that would like, oh, look at that was something. Maybe it was a split second, but there was something that was embodied and true that emerges in the midst of my kind of trying. Like even that was fun. Even the trying to incorporate some move or something or another. And it's one of the cleanest experiences I've seen of just not caring in the best possible way about what I thought or anybody else thought.
Mm. There's a beautiful story I heard the enlightened Jesuit Anthony de Mello share, and I share sometimes. And he was talking to a group, and he was saying, I used to try to help people, but I mean, essentially, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but it was something like, it didn't really help, and it annoyed the people. Like and he said, and then one day I realized that my only job is to show up and rain. And if that rain falls on a rock, it's going to roll off the rock. And if that rain falls on hard soil, it might soften the soil. And if that rain falls on fertile soil, things will grow. But my job is to show up and rain. And that's what I hear in that experience of dance. You show up and you dance. And will it do something in the world? Well, might help, can't hurt.
That experience of watching people rain, witnessing people rain, being rain myself, I can't help but think that that is doing something for the world. It may not move anyone consciously or unconsciously, but that just being us has to be felt. Not that it needs to be. In my conversation with Mavis, she said something like, when we're being ourselves, people feel it. And it shows them where they're not being themselves. Yeah. What they do with that is completely their choice.
Yeah.
But there is a choice that opens up from that somehow. I don't know if that's a real choice or a parent choice. Beautiful.
I like the phrase choiceless choice, because it when you're that clear, when you're just living, it's so obvious what to do. Yeah, you could do something else, but why would you? So it's a choice, but it's a choice. It's like you're not going to choose different, but you could. And that's a very sweet place to be. It's a very sweet way to live. You know, if we wanted to talk in terms of free will, it's using my free will to follow God's will. I don't have to. But God, it's beautiful when I do.
I remember hearing myself say years ago to someone, it kind of strikes me as funny that I remember it, that sure, I could be anybody. I could be anything. I could be something that wasn't me. But why would I? And it's funny that I said this so many years ago. If I look back at my journals from when I was a teenager, the same stuff was on my mind. Like I was onto this idea of who am I and what is the universe? How is it moving through me? And what is this connection and all of this? And I keep seeing it. And it's different every time. I love not having a plan for my show. Not having a...
Oh, I love not having a plan for my life.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is my show, baby. Not this show.
Oh, that's... Now I can...
This is just a metaphor for the real deal.
You are not listening to a podcast. You are listening to a metaphor. Coming up after the break.
God.
Wildspire.
I'm going to make a sample of that, Michael. There's a way, just showing up as me and seeing what happens has been opening up so much for me. And again, I'll come back to dance because that's like my current experiment. It's something that I really stepped into with feeling like I have nothing here. I'm at zero. I can't rely on my past experience and things that I know, like, So what is it like to step into that and be me and just be? And it has astounded and surprised me how I don't need to think to learn. And I don't need to try to learn. In fact, the less of that I do, the better it seems to go. The more I'm just being me, having the experience that I'm in without the addition of trying or efforting, the easier it goes, sometimes surprisingly so. Even when I'm not catching on, even when like I can be with my body in something like, it's like my body has a certain threshold for like what it can comprehend or take in. And it gets to the max and it goes, I'm really dumb right now. And my brain turns off and my body's like, I don't know what's right and what's left. But even that is such a fun experience from that place. And I probably knew that when I was a very small child, or not knew it consciously, but I had that experience. But I didn't know that as grown-up me. I really didn't.
You know, one of my favorite experiences, and it makes me giggle literally every time, is when I'm lifting weights and I hit that point where I'm telling my body to move, to do one, and it just doesn't. And I just start laughing because it's so funny to me that like it's my body's not listening to me. I'm telling it all the way. It's just that disconnect, so weird. And it's that kind of beautiful thing where you really get, oh, I'm not my body. I have a body and what a gift, but it's not me. And it's somehow for me easiest to notice when it doesn't do what I tell it.
Have you ever had your body tell you something that you don't know? Like it works the other way too. So the other thing I've noticed, and this I had noticed for a couple of years in trying to relieve some low back pain that I had. Now I'm saying my body, but this is what we might call wisdom speaking through the body. I don't know the difference. I don't know
Yeah.
the difference. But I just started being with it, being with my body, being with my back. And it would occur to me to try some things and I would notice, like, move a little bit. And if I really wasn't thinking, I'd find myself doing something. And then I stumble onto ways to relieve the pain through stretches that I didn't have any anatomical reference for why that should work, like hamstrings and feet and like different areas of the body that if you're a body worker, this makes sense to you, like how all these areas are connected. But I don't know that. But my body is connected to itself. And like how amazing that it can also do that.
Like I have been more conscious of it over the years when it and I kind of go with wisdom using my body rather than my body telling me. Like I used to get this feeling in the pit of my stomach that was so uncomfortable that I would get into fights. I'd punch myself in the stomach if I couldn't find somebody else to hit me. I once threw myself down a flight of stairs to get away from this feeling. It was so uncomfortable. And it was a few years later, I was still a teenager, that I noticed it only happened when I was ignoring myself, when I was going against myself. And this horrible feeling that I had tried so hard to get rid of, mask, cover over, was my own wisdom telling me, not that way, you know. And the kindness of that to me, not what I did to it, but it's like, oh my God, we are set up that all the information we need to live a beautiful life is in us. It is being given to us in real time. And most of us haven't learned how to listen. Not like you need to learn how to listen. No, we just literally haven't learned what it means. Like when you are in a car for the first time, it's like there's a lot going on. But once you learn the car, you don't even have to think about it. Well, we're the same. We're incredibly well designed, but most of us don't know what any of the bells and whistles and clicks and levers do. So we just are randomly like a kid going, I'm driving. I'm living my life. It's like, but you can learn. It doesn't take long to learn because we're made for it. Like that is how we're made.
I love that it's something that even if they don't know it, everyone has an experience of somewhere, sometime. They sit a little while and reflect of, oh yeah, I know how that works. And it's never far away. It's like, it's being us. It's the experience of being us allows that. That's part of it. That wisdom that comes through. And I love seeing it. I love seeing it in people and just going like, that thing right there. Do you see? Do you see? Until maybe they see it too. Mm-hmm. So hopeful. And it simplifies things. There keeps being less for me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That I realize I haven't said it for a long time, but I used to all the time share an insight that, well, I thought the client had it. The client thought I said it. I don't know who saw it first, but we got to the end of an intensive and, summing it up, we went, however little it looks like there is to do, there's even less to do.
And all the doing comes from just being.
Yeah. Sid would talk about doing without a doer. It's like, of course, if you were videoing us, we're doing stuff. Like I sometimes, just imagine somebody thinking that, when I talk about stuff like effortless success, that I sit in my chair and magically people appear and money. And it's like, no, but there isn't that sense of cause effect, that it is my doing that is causing. It's part of the game. If I don't show up, it doesn't happen. If I don't give my hands over to spirit, spirit can't use them. But when I do, it does. And that's, to me, the most beautiful use of an incarnation I've found yet.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Michael, for sharing this. I feel like I ought to have been so nervous in talking with you, but I didn't have that assumption and I didn't have that experience. And it's a great pleasure to just hang out. I felt that being. I feel that being from you. I feel being. And it's really amazing. And I hope that it ripples out and that other people feel it too.
You know what I bet? I bet if rocks listen to us, they won't hear much. And if hard soil listens to us, it'll soften. And if fertile soil listens to us, things will grow. Just a theory. Just a theory.
Oh, that's good. So I would love to share with my listeners and community where they can find out more about the Michael Neill. If they should choose to do so, where shall we send them?
Still wish my website was themichaelneill.org now, but it's just michaelneill.org. There's no the. So that's really the main. That's where we've got a monthly newsletter where we announce everything, and there is a lot. I am aware that I put out a lot of content, and I always think of a story of Joseph Campbell when he was the Power of Myth guy. That he used to be a college professor, and he just loved this stuff that he taught. And there was a very ambitious student in one of his classes, and she said she came to drop out after a month, and he was like, "Why? You're clearly really picking this up, and you seem to have a real passion for it." And she said, "It's your reading list, Dr. Campbell. I started early in the summer to try and get a jump on it, but even if I read a book a day, I don't think I would get through it by the end of term." And he said, "Oh, that's not a reading list for the course. That's a reading list for the rest of your life." And like, that's how I feel about my output. It's like, I'm not saying keep up. I'm just saying it's there. You'll stumble across the right thing for you. So that's all there at michaelneill.org. I know my Instagram is Michael Neill Catalyst, but I have no idea what any of my other social media are. But I bet on my website you can find them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here, for being you, and sharing your ridiculously prolific amount of content.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining me for today's Wildspire conversation. If you'd like to receive a weekly Wildspire email from me filled with inspiring stories, on-marketing experiments, tips for playing your way to impact and income without the hustle and hype, insights from my spiritual business journey, and more, go to theawakenedbusiness.com/wildspire. Until next time, may you know yourself as the gorgeous wild creation you are.